Just whose side are you on? And just whose side are they on? That's what I want you to ask yourself. In the ultimate battle of us versus them, of darkness versus the light, just which side is it that you serve? The fact is that there are a great many people in this country who either through ignorance, greed, or fear find themselves on the wrong side in this battle. In their minds, in most cases, they believe themselves to be doing the right thing, but they are in fact deceived, and only the painful process of opening up their minds to this deception will ultimately lead them to the light. The endemic ignorance of our society hasn't come about by accident. The whole premise of our democracy, the wisdom behind the design of our Constitution, is that people should make informed decisions about those who represent them. The extent to which our electorate is adequately informed has steadily eroded for generations. And today the mainstream media, which was relied upon by nearly everyone for this information by which to make these decisions, provides a brand of news that has little or no resemblance to truth. That's how we let our government be taken over by people who are so thoroughly morally bankrupt. News is no longer about informing people, but about entertaining them, and about maintaining the illusion created by these dark forces through propaganda and outright lies. The media is wholly owned by a few corporations, and there are a great many subjects which these outlets will simply ignore, as ultimately everyone within these companies knows they would face the prospect of losing their job should they defy their bosses and dare to speak the truth. News anchors making multi-million-dollar salaries have a lot to lose. You should never count on them to rock the boat or say a single word that might get them fired. The complicity of the media is achieved through greed and fear. Though they're not making multi-million-dollar salaries, there are still a good many people dedicated to finding and spreading the truth. Journalism is not dead, but a real journalism has become much harder to find, and has gone from being slowly eroded to the state of things today where true journalism and truth itself has really come under attack. Just look at the case of Julian Assange. Sadly, a high percentage of people are not familiar with his story, and even sadder, many of those that are believe him to be a villain. In 2006, Julian Assange created WikiLeaks, which is an encrypted platform for whistleblowers, which allows people to submit things anonymously. Knowing that there are a great many very terrible things which happen in our world far out of the sight of cameras or public knowledge, and wanting ultimately to give these powerful and evil men reason to be concerned that news of their terrible actions might one day come to light, he created this site with the purest and noblest of ideals. And when he did so, he got a lot of documents. In fact, many hundreds of thousands of documents. The sheer number of documents was an enormous problem for the tiny staff at WikiLeaks. Assange tried to partner with traditional news sources like the New York Times and the Guardian newspapers to do the work of redacting things which, if released, ultimately could truly lead to people's harm. While these newspapers did agree to help in this regard, they both ultimately betrayed him and let him take all the heat from those who ultimately objected to the release of these documents. The release of them put him squarely in the crosshairs of those dark forces who wished to hide the scandalous actions of the powerful and evil. As Julian quickly shot into prominence as a symbol of the resistance to these evil forces, it became clear that to simply assassinate him would only serve to make him a martyr and strengthen the resolve of his organization and supporters. They decided to take him down by assassinating his character. Though he has never been charged with any crime, he has for years fought extradition to Sweden, where he is wanted for questioning on alleged sex crimes, which really amount, by all accounts, as nothing more than consensual one-night stands with two different women. He was on house arrest for more than a year while his appeals made their way through the British courts, and recently his last appeal with the Supreme Court there was denied. Of course, the absurdity of it all is that if this were really about him simply answering some questions, he's been available the entire time. The Swedish prosecutor could easily have gone to England and interviewed him. Anyone who says this extradition is really about sexual misconduct is either ignorant to the facts or outright lying. Sweden will not give any guarantees that Assange won't simply be handed over to the US, where he's also not been charged with anything, but likely would face the prospect of torture or worse. Certainly, if the treatment of Bradley Manning is any indication, an Army private accused of leaking classified documents to WikiLeaks, or any of the people held in Guantanamo Bay, our government no longer adheres to the Geneva Conventions banning on torture. So, with all his appeals exhausted, Julian went to the London embassy from Ecuador and requested asylum. He had previously interviewed Ecuador's President Correa, and they had become friends. Correa took the request under advisement, and then shortly after the Olympics ended, he granted Julian the asylum he'd asked for. Unfortunately, the UK will not allow him safe passage to Ecuador. So for the past 2 months, Julian Assange has been stuck in the Ecuadorian embassy in London with dozens of police surrounding him 24 hours a day. Perhaps most disturbingly, through all this there have been a good many in the media and in our government who have openly called for Julian Assange's head. Hillary Clinton has repeated the unsubstantiated claim that Assange, quote, has blood on his hands. Sarah Palin said, Julian Assange should be targeted like the Taliban. Bob Beckel of Fox News said, a dead man can't leak stuff. The guy's a traitor, he's treasonous, and he has broken every law of the United States. And I'm not for the death penalty, so there's only one way you can do it. Illegally shoot the son of a bitch. Another Fox News commentator, Eric Bolling, said he should be underground, 6 feet underground. He should be put in jail or worse, hanged in a public forum. And there have been a great many people who have not just been apologists for, but actually advocated the use of torture on America's prisoners. These are people who like to call themselves patriots. These people would have you believe that blind obedience to the evil and powerful forces controlling our country and our world is both patriotic and Christian. These are, in fact, people devoid of any kind of integrity. These people would have you believe the act of pointing out how what America is differs from how it should be is an act of one who does not truly love this country. Ask yourself, just whose agenda is it behind these ideas? What master do the people who espouse these ideas serve? I would argue that our country was built on the ideals of dissent from the powerful, and the act of standing up against these evil and powerful forces is in fact true patriotism. For most people among us who aren't ultimate believers in and outright supporters of the dark, who still do not stand up for what is right, they can only come to this inaction through 3 ways. Those are ignorance, laziness, and cowardice. We cannot reasonably hope for the ultimately lazy to become active any more than we can expect the extremely cowardly to exhibit great bravery for our cause. There's only one of these things that we can combat, and that is ignorance. So that is something I actively fight among the people around me every single day. The pursuit of truth and the mission to spread it has become a dangerous business. Just ask Julian Assange, or Bradley Manning, or any number of other courageous whistleblowers who have found themselves persecuted by our seemingly ever-darkening government. I would say that the fact that Assange hasn't yet been disappeared and that Manning hasn't been forgotten is proof that these forces of evil have weaknesses. And I believe their weaknesses are more prevalent and serious than people are led to believe. These cracks in their armor are spreading, and the facade of their invincibility is crumbling. I do not believe our struggle is hopeless. In fact, I believe the light will ultimately win out. And toward those ends, I shall stand dedicated to the cause. Those of us active in the resistance, the legions of us working diligently toward the ultimate victory of the light, we did not descend from cowardly men, and we will not yield. I ask you to join us and stand with us. Together, we will liberate our world from these forces of darkness. And to those of you out there who've chosen to support the wrong side in this struggle, expect us.